Spider-Man has invented a device that will allow him to see into the future and predict the outcome. But of course, every villain's gonna want that, aren't they? Welcome to the Comicstorian channel, where I take some of your favorite trade paperbacks and single issues, and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. But then I read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Today we're going to be covering Amazing Spider-Man issues 66, 67, 68, and 69. And all of this is leading up to the giant-sized chameleon issue. The information that you need to know moving forward is that Spider-Man does have a sister. Her name is Teresa Parker, and she's kind of a mystery if she's really a sister or not. And today we're going to find out more about that. We're also still dealing with the aftermath of Kindred and all of that stuff that is going on with Spider-Man. And if you don't remember, Kindred is actually the revived version of Harry Osborn as a demon. And that's pretty much it. We're going to roll into today's episode where everything else is going to be explained in the comic book itself. But don't forget, if you want to support this industry, if you want to keep comics coming out, then consider going to your local comic book store and picking up these issues, or going over to Comixology and getting the digital versions. And if you do like this video and our presentation, please consider giving it a like, subscribing to the channel, and joining us at Patreon at patreon.com/Comicstorian. Today's complete story is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Everyone's heard of Raid Shadow Legends, so you know it's got tons of champions, over 600 now. But today I'm going to tell you more about the bosses. My new favorite boss, Sylvana, Guardian of the Spirit Keep. Here's my advice on how to beat her. Bring healing debuff champions and buff removal champions, and you've got it in the bag. What I love about this game is how cool the champion designs are, how unique their skills are, and that you can even see reviews from other players on where to use your new champions and even see which artifacts work best for them so that they can be the strongest that they can be. This month, Raid just released a huge new Doom Tower update with 2 huge new bosses to take on. And if that's not enough, the whole month is packed with awesome events and tournaments, including a new, very special event with a new feature, Super Raids, which are amazing for getting new players tons of great rewards and speeding up your progress massively. If you want an even bigger head start, all you have to do is hit the link in the description below or scan the QR code right here, because new players will get the epic hero Shinoro, who is amazing in the Doom Tower, by the way. 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard so that you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in-game. Seriously, look how cool this champion is. And you'll find your extra rewards in your inbox in the next 30 days. Once you're in-game, you can find me under the name Infected Legend, which is INFECTEDLEGYND, and if you're fast, you can even join my clan, Crow's Perch. It's that easy. Just click the link in the description below and I'll see you in-game. And if you think I'm lying to you, this is my account we're showing off. Alright, let's get into the video. Kindred's body convulses as he screams in rage and pain, the magical energy that courses through him stopping. I admire your fortitude, demon. At this for days and you've never broken, but as I explained, I was trying to help. Too late for all of that now, sadly, Baron Mordo says to the demon as he stares at him, his hands beginning to glow again as he prepares another attack. Kindred looks at him with a blank expression and Mordo stops long enough to explain. Fisk no longer needs Kindred, as he has acquired the tablets and brought back his son from the dead. In his home, Mayor pulls Richard Fisk close to him for a hug. It'll be different this time, Richard. It'll all be different, he whispers. But back with Mordo, he leans against the dark energy cell, gloating that he can finally end Kindred's life. Father! Kindred gasps, but the word merely makes Mordo smile as he prepares another attack. I'll be sure to relay the message, Mordo says when suddenly he is punched in the back of the head as the Spot appears. Mordo falls to the ground unconscious as the Spot pulls down the walls of Kindred's prison. Norman Osborn enters the room with his guards, promising that he'll keep his word and set the Spot free as he orders everyone out. The room is emptied, and Norman leans in over Kindred's body. It's all right, Harry. I'm here. Elsewhere in the city, Spider-Man is clinging to the wall, thinking about all of the mistakes that he has made recently. Are you really gonna sit there and do the pensive brooding thing right now? Wolverine asks, with Spider-Man glancing down at his group of friends, the ones that helped him with the mob war, the ones that he told to trust Boomerang. He climbs down and they begin to discuss how the Rose is back. That guy's a walking disaster. Pure chaos, Jessica points out, and the group agrees, not sure why they've let Kingpin move unfettered up to this point. That's on us. We should have done something about it, Luke tells the group. Elsewhere, MJ runs out snapping photos with her adoring fans before jumping into a car. But that car screeches away as everyone stares in shock, and inside, She leans into the front seat to see the supervillain overdrive. Sorry to do this, Miss Watson, but we need to talk. It's about our mutual friend, Carly Cooper. They rocket through the streets, avoiding traffic and changing lanes as he explains that he was hurt and Carly was there for him. But she has now since disappeared. After they discuss it for a few moments, MJ agrees. Something's not right. Meanwhile, back at Ravencroft, Norman cradles his son's head, comforting him. Dad, you really did it. You rescued me. Kindred coughs, and Norman nods as he leans down to his son. I couldn't let you down again, Harry. Seeing even a monster like Fisk save his child, it gave me hope. A feeling that perhaps it's not too late. Kindred looks up at him, explaining that it isn't too late. That this is what he fought through hell for. Why did he cleanse him? And while the two of them are sharing a sweet moment, one in which Norman thinks that his son is finally accepting him, the centipede reaches out, wrapping around Norman's neck, throwing him across the room. He fails, bouncing from wall to wall until Harry throws him away. Idiot! Kindred snaps as he looks down at his father's broken body. Meanwhile, over at the offices of Threats and Menaces, Jonah shouts for someone to get him pictures of Spider-Man, but Nora is nearby, explaining that Spider-Man has cut the feed, he has ditched the suit. Jonah doesn't understand. He did this to make it up to Spider-Man, to prove to the world that the wall crawler was a hero. Anger suddenly fills Jonah's voice as he begins to shout to the room. Well, if that's what he wants, two can play at that game. Jonah's gonna get his own hero. Meanwhile, Peter Parker is standing in his destroyed apartment thinking about how he should have saved some of the money from Jonah to fix the wall. But he gave it all away to help rebuild Feast. One to his old life of supervillainy, the other to a love life with a supervillain. He needs to clear his mind, and he glances at his phone, realizing that he has also missed 16 messages from one of his old friends. He quickly changes, heading out the door, meeting up with Betty at the nearby restaurant, but is shocked to see that she is pregnant. Hey Peter, long time no see? She says with a smile as she sees his shocked face. In an unknown location, Carly Cooper awakens, sitting in the dark to discover that she is locked in a cell, and she begins to bang on the bars, yelling for someone to let her out. It's pointless. There's no escape, Harry tells her as he leans forward. Meanwhile, night has fallen on a prison known as the Hiding Place. The Latverian prison is one of the most secure locations in the world, sitting atop a mountain range just over the Simkarian border. Inside, the guards stand at the ready, but as is the way with all long duties, they have grown complacent. And someone descends from the ceiling, swinging back and forth, kicking them unconscious. The door slides open and the chameleon looks to see Teresa Parker, Peter Parker's sister, staring back at him. Ah, there you are, he says with a smile, and she stares back at him for a beat before pulling out her pistol. Hello, Dimitri, she snaps. Thunder echoes in the room as she squeezes the trigger. Back in New York, Peter's eyes go wide as he stares at a pregnant Betty Brant. Why didn't you tell me? He finally manages, and she just looks at him. I think you mean, why didn't I respond to your 700 emails and text messages, Betty? She tells him. Finally, Peter gets past his surprise, pulling her in for a hug, giving her a congratulations. The two of them go back and forth for a moment, discussing the story that she is working on and MJ, but finally Peter needs to know, who's the father? And she tells him with joy that it's Ned's. She begins to launch into the story, but the past flashes in Peter's mind. How Ned Leeds had died, but came back from the dead when the Jackal cloned him. Betty explains that an anonymous source was helping her with the story before asking to meet. It was in a dark parking garage when Betty discovered that it was Ned. Reunited, the two shared an impassioned kiss and a night together. But Betty had to keep digging into the story, and Ned had to stay underground. And as she continues with her story, she realizes that Peter looks overly shocked, and then stumbling to his feet, he tells her that he forgot a meeting at ESU. As he begins to rush out of the diner, she yells out to him that she does want to talk to him about the story because she could use his help. He quickly rushes into an alleyway, changing into his Spider-Man costume, because what he's afraid to tell Betty is that he didn't tell her when Ned came back because he figured that the clone had died, but later discovered that the clone of Ned Leeds had survived only to be shot by the Taskmaster. I didn't account for the possibility that he might have reached out to her, he thinks to himself, as he swings over the city, stopping on a rooftop, angry at himself for what he did, punching a brick. He let a clone reach out to his ex-girlfriend and get her pregnant, and then die. Meanwhile, back at the prison known as the Hiding Place, the chameleon is clutching his wounded shoulder, looking up at Teresa. You shot me! Again! She nods as she steps across the room. She tells him 3rd time's the charm, punching him in the gut. but he grins at her, explaining that he knows that appearances can be deceiving. "You didn't come here to kill me." He nods, blood oozing between his fingers as he tries to stop the wound in his shoulder. "You came because you wanted information. You want to know about your parents." She stares at him for a moment before lashing out and punching him across the room, but he stands again, wiping blood from his mouth. "I want you to know, I won't hold this anger against you. That would be unfair. I can't imagine how difficult this must all be for you. He told you about this, didn't he? And you felt it. That sinking feeling in your gut. Recognition." She snarls back at him, yelling for him to shut up, and then draws her pistol, aiming it at his head. But the chameleon smiles and talks. "You just want to know if you like them." Back over at the ESU campus, Peter and Jamie begin to work on their project, Clairvoyant. Peter nods to Jamie, marking in the log that they're beginning trial 7.6. "Ready when you are," he tells his partner. They activate the Clairvoyant system, but the battery quickly begins to overload and the system shuts down. While Jamie tries to come up with an excuse, tries to explain that they just need more power, Peter tells him that it's not going to work. They've used everything they have. They continue to go back and forth, as Peter explains that Clairvoyant's power source should have lasted longer, but Jamie had apparently been conducting experiments on his own. It gets so heated that Jamie grabs the device and rushes out of the room, leaving Peter to wonder what is going on with Jamie. That night, as he headed back to his home, he's greeted by his sister at the door with a smile before stepping into his mother's room. Her medical machines continuing to hiss and beep as they fight the cancer to keep her alive. As he steps into an alleyway to bring out the trash later on, someone calls out, "Lucky me, managing to get the drop of the legendary Clairvoyant. You must be slipping." Jamie whirls around in fear and surprise as Chance steps out. "How did you find me?" Jamie asks, fear in his voice, but Chance just shakes his head, pointing out that he is a serious supervillain, and he holds up a piece of paper explaining that he is here to collect the debt. "You get the point, right? Time to pay up," he says as he tosses the paper away. After discussing their overall plan, Chance leaves him with an opportunity to help out Chance, or he'll go kill Jamie's family. His choice. So when Jamie asks what does Chance want, Chance explains that a casino that could use a clairvoyance device to predict the future would never lose. But Jamie goes on explaining that they don't have a valid power source. Chance doesn't believe him. So Jamie finally reveals there may be a way to power this device, and it's called the Catalyst. Meanwhile, back at the cell with Teresa Parker, she aims her pistol at Chameleon's head, but the villain doesn't even blink, continuing to talk. He knows that Teresa has spent her entire life living a lie. The weapon begins to shake as tears stream from her eyes. "No, I am Teresa Parker, daughter of Richard and May Parker, sister of Peter Parker," she whispers, and Chameleon nods. "Of course you are. And it would be the simplest thing in the world to prove it. All you have to do is put that gun against my head and pull the trigger. But then, you'll never get the answers that you seek. Who are you really, Teresa?" he tells her as he steps forward, pushing his head against the barrel of the gun. "Right when you were so close. If only you'd let me help you." Back over with Spider-Man, he swings through the city, heading for Betty's apartment. He has to tell her the truth. She deserves to know where Ned Leeds is, that he died. Quickly changing back into his street clothes, he knocks on the door, and he quickly apologizes for running out on her and feels like they should talk. She opens the door wider. "I agree. Why don't you come in and we can all catch up?" she says, and Peter steps through the door, surprised because Ned Leeds is standing there, looking far better than the last time Peter saw him, dressed in a fine suit and clean shaven. "Good to see you, old pal," Ned tells him. In the cell, Teresa grabs Chameleon, dragging him out into the hallway, slamming him into the floor, ordering for him to start talking. He struggles, motioning to the next cell, telling her that the answers that she seeks are right there. She then hits the buttons on the keypad, unlocking it. "Everything both of us have done in our lives has led to this point. This reunion." The doors slide open, and Teresa stands for a moment in shock as the Chameleon gets up behind her. "You wanted answers about your parents, Teresa. Who better to give them to you than the man who killed them? The Finisher." The Finisher looks at Teresa, standing in his cell, calm and collected. "Teresa, it's been far too long. From the look in your eyes, I can see that there's no need for an introduction," he says to her, so Teresa stares at the man that killed her mother and father. She raises her pistol and fires, but he merely laughs as the bullets pass through him as though he were a ghost. Chameleon pushes Teresa into the cell and she discovers that it is actually a well-furnished and expensive apartment. And his prison suit is now replaced with a fine suit as he begins to mix drinks. I asked Chameleon to bring you here so that we could talk. All about what I can offer you and what you can do for me. Meanwhile, back at Betty's apartment, Peter is in shock at seeing Ned Leeds standing before him. Ned, you're... what? About to be a father. Yeah, he was pretty shocked, Betty says with a smile. That's an understatement, Ned says with a nod. Peter is still shocked, straight up pointing out that Ned died. It's a bit more complicated than that, he says, offering Peter a seat, promising that it is really him, and he'll try to explain. It was long ago that he was brainwashed into believing that he was the Hobgoblin by Roderick Kingsley. But the stress of the mind control led Ned into a destructive spiral. However, he came to blows with Flash Thompson, who easily defeated him. Ned's mind couldn't understand how Flash could have easily beaten him, so he took a trip to Germany to search for more Goblin serum. He drank as much as he could, but it still didn't change anything. The Foreigner's men found him and they killed him, but the serum managed to bring him back after a couple of days. Someone found him and helped him, though Ned explains that he can't tell them who that was. Betty then steps in, explaining that her and Ned had always worked towards the same goals and never realized it. She was working on a story that would expose misinformation that was coming out of Russia. They were having problems finding the proof, though, and the source reached out to her for help. When she asked the source if she could meet them, they agreed, and she discovered that it was actually Ned this whole time. And Ned explains that he now wants to rebuild his life right here back in New York with Betty. So that brings us to why were they reaching out to Peter Parker? Well, they've discovered that Jamie, his partner who created clairvoyance at ESU, is connected to the Foreigner. Getting this information, Peter rushes out of the door, apologizing once again. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Jamie moves through the building towards the catalyst. Chance speaking into his ears, telling him that it will be a piece of cake. Get this power source and create the ultimate device for a casino. As Jamie tries to defend himself and explains how difficult this really is, we see Chance is actually in the van outside, sitting next to the Foreigner, and a group of jack-o'-lanterns are watching from a nearby rooftop. Jamie enters, sees Doc Connors in his lizard form. He begins to escort Jamie over to help with his experiment, but that's when Jamie sees the doctor's security badge hanging out of his lab coat. Chance yells over the comms to take it. So, Jamie grabs the badge off the coat, and he quickly runs to the door, telling Connors that he has to use the bathroom. After a little bit more back and forth, he then walks into the Catalyst security room using Connors' badge. He immediately begins yelling at the guards, demanding to know which of them has been messing with the temperature controls. And as the guards turn away, Slide launches himself into the air ducts. He slips and slides through the tight spaces, eventually exiting directly over the guards' heads. He drops from the ceiling, landing in front of the laser grid guarded Catalyst. The guards are still distracted as he pulls out a pistol that is charged with PIM particles. The Catalyst shrinks down, he reaches in, grabbing it. At that time, Spider-Man reaches ESU, walking into the lab, still surprised by Doc Connors working there. Doc, I'm looking for one of your students, he tries to explain. As Slide begins to turn away, Jamie turns from the guards, telling them not to keep messing with the temperature and that he'll forget this ever happened. The window crashes inward and Spider-Man leaps through. Jamie, look out! Hearing the commotion, Chance and the Foreigner rush out of their van. We're blown! Foreigner shouts. Slide turns, slipping across the floor to fight Spider-Man. You think? He asks as he lashes out to punch Spider-Man. Although he was always a slippery villain, Peter knows that he can take on Slide alone. Suddenly, the wall explodes inward, revealing the Foreigner standing there with a very large gun, flanked by Chance and several jack-o'-lanterns. Meanwhile, back at the cell, Teresa recoils at the Finisher's words, anger flashing across her face. Help you? The only thing that I'll ever help you with is finding your way back into the grave. I understand your anger, Agent. After all, you've been lied to for so long. But the Finisher is here to finally tell you the truth. After all, it sets us all free! Meanwhile, back at ESU, Spider-Man leaps out of the way of the pumpkin bombs as the jack-o'-lanterns fly in around him. He kicks out, colliding with one of them, punching hard into his pumpkin helmet. Did you guys get some sort of bulk discount on costumes? He asks, but the lantern continues to spin as his pumpkin bomb flies towards Jamie. Suddenly, Slide pins Spider-Man down. Chance begins to try and fire his wrist lasers at Spidey, but he shrugs off the blast, throwing Slide into the other villains. As they collide, the miniature catalyst falls to the ground and Jamie reaches out, catching it. Nice catch! Spidey shouts as he grabs Jamie, leaping through the hole that the Foreigner created. Once we get outside, I'll hold them back while you get away, Jamie, Spider-Man tells him. But before they can escape, the foreigner turns, blasting Spider-Man in the back with his huge laser rifle. They both hit the ground, bouncing across the ground. And Spidey struggles to his feet, seeing the collection of villains that are charging at them both, yelling for Jamie to run as he leaps back into the fight. He shoots a web, grabbing the foreigner's gun. He then spins, slamming it into Slide. But as the battle continues, his spider senses begin to go crazy, and he turns back to avoid more blasts from everyone. What he doesn't see, though, is that Jamie is standing nearby, not running. He whispers to himself and holds up the catalyst. A blast of energy ripping through the strange device, striking Spider-Man in the chest. He hits the ground, stunned. Foreigner comes over, kicking him for good measure. And then they all walk away, with Chance throwing his arm over Jamie's shoulder. You did good, kid. We'll make a proper villain of you yet. Meanwhile, back at the cell, the Finisher looks back at Teresa and begins his truth. We'll start with the truth about me and my much presumed death. He explains how Spider-Man was seeking the murderer of Richard and May Parker, and that led him to the Finisher. At the time, it was believed that Spider-Man had killed him. But the Finisher explains that he barely survived and was taken care of by the Chameleon. Meanwhile, back with Spider-Man, he awakens to find all of the villains gone and Doc Connors rushing out to make sure he's all right. Doc Connors tries to explain that he would have helped, but the chip keeps him from being aggressive, and Spider-Man waves him off, agreeing that the chip is a worthy trade. He then leaps into the air and swings away, and very quickly finds himself in front of Betty Brant's apartment window. Ned Leeds! He shouts as he sees his old friend/enemy. Boy, are you a sight for sore eyes. Peter Parker sent me. Someone needs your help. They let Spider-Man in, and in a short time, he catches them up to speed on everything that has happened. With the Foreigner, with Chance, with the Jack-O-Lanterns, with everything. So he picks up Ned and they head off to their objective. But back at the cell, the Finisher pours himself another glass and explains that they aren't in his apartment. The images shift and suddenly she is in a command center. Another truth. I'm wherever I need to be. Teresa is shocked as he tells her that he brought her here to talk about the future. Meanwhile, at the palace, the casino where they're going to use the clairvoyant device, Jamie has finished hooking up the clairvoyant device to the catalyst. He activates it at Foreigner's command. The villain steps forward as the device activates and demands to know how it works. Jamie nods, explaining that you merely ask the device a question and it'll give you the best possible answer based on the data that has been pulled from a vast multiverse. So far, we have found the success rate to be in the upper 80s, lower 90s range, Jamie tells them. We're gonna be so rich! Chance shouts with glee. But what they don't see is that one of the Jack-O-Lanterns is turning away and begins to make a phone call. The Foreigner looks up at the strange lights that are swirling over the clairvoyant. So many possibilities that the mind races to choose one, he whispers to himself, and suddenly pumpkin bombs begin to explode all around them as the Jack-O-Lanterns race through the room, grabbing a hold of Jamie and beginning to fly away. And that's when the lanterns shout back, explaining to the Foreigner and to Chance that actually they and half the people in this casino work for the Finisher, the very villain that is currently explaining to Teresa Parker her actual origins. And now we close our story by going back over to that cell as the Finisher explains, Agent Parker, let's discuss the truth about you and your relations to Peter Parker. And that concludes today's episode of Spider-Man. So much is happening in the world of Peter Parker, but once again, he has failed again. He has lost Jamie, he has lost the clairvoyant device. On top of that, we're gonna finally discover the truth about his sister, Teresa Parker. And on top of that, the Finisher and Chameleon have been orchestrating their own plans in general, with Chance and the Foreigner pretty much defeated at this point, but not by Spider-Man. So what is going on? Well, subscribe to the channel, check back next week as we conclude this storyline with the giant-sized Chameleon conspiracy issue. And then after that, we'll be covering the Sinister War and the end of this writer's run on Spider-Man. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you want to talk more about this, please consider joining me over at our Discord. Over there, you can chat about whatever you want, from the latest comic books to the latest video games. You can also join us over at patreon.com, where you can get a vote on the comic books that are coming to the channel as we deep dive into a lot of these older storylines and help you find them out there in the world of comics. And other than that, guys, just thank you so much for watching this long video. I'll see you next time right here.